Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing, private channel. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about some developments in boxing, and then let's talk about a young heavyweight that you need to know about, because pretty soon this guy's going to emerge on the world stage. First, Chad Dawson, Jean Pascal. They haven't announced it yet, but I'm here to tell you, not based on inside information, but just based on economics, that Chad Dawson, Jean Pascal rematch is not going to happen anytime soon. I know it's scheduled to happen in a matter of weeks. It's not going to happen. Weeks ago, a story broke that the Bute people were now willing to fight Jean Pascal. Now, I know to most boxing fans, they believe that a guy should fight for the title. If I'm a light heavyweight, if I'm a contender, and if I have a date set against the champion, right, literally a title opportunity, and I've already beaten that champion. In other words, I'm a viable contender here. I have a realistic chance of being very competitive in the fight. Then why would I fight a guy who isn't even a light heavyweight? A guy who weighs 168 pounds. And why would I fight that guy, especially after the guy lost 2 fights ago? He doesn't currently have a belt, and he looked pedestrian, non-spectacular in his last fight against a limited fighter. That's the decision tree that Jean Pascal is facing right now. But really, the decision is a no-brainer, because as I've said for a long time here online, you know, these boxers are literally risking their health for paydays. Sometimes the payday is actually more important than the title opportunity, especially when, if you win the payday fight, you're still going to be in line for a title opportunity. In other words, as long as Pascal keeps winning, boxing fans of the light heavyweight division will know in the back of their heads that he is the guy who gave Chad Dawson his loss. Right? Boxing fans will understand that whatever Chad Dawson does, right, Chad Dawson has unfinished business with Jean Pascal. The only way that unfinished business goes away is if Pascal gets beaten up in other fights and goes away. Right? So Pascal is risking very little, in my opinion, by actually fighting Bute. Right? Let me also point out, too, that Pascal's victory over Chad Dawson actually now looms even bigger, given that Chad Dawson actually beat Bernard Hopkins, right? The man who beat Jean Pascal. Right, so Pascal now is in the crosshairs of a nice set of fights where in history, as people talk about the Pascal loss to Hopkins, they'll also have to mention that Pascal beat Dawson, who beat Hopkins. Right? Let's also talk about this Bute fight. Understand that Bute and Pascal are probably the 2 biggest names right now in Canadian boxing. Right? Pascal is going to make at least twice as much fighting Bute as he would have made fighting for the title against Chad Dawson. Right? Understand, boxing is a very short career. Don't be fooled by all these 40-year-olds who are continuing to fight and who are continuing to be successful, right? Most fighters are out of the game by the time they're 35. Even great fighters. Just take a look at when Marvin Hagler left the game. We remember the bald head. I know he looked older. Just do a boxrec.com search for Marvin Hagler to see when he got out the game. Most elite fighters don't fight into their late 30s, right? They're here and then they're gone. Some walk away, right? Lennox Lewis. Think right now David Haye, who literally has walked away from the sport unless he gets a mega fight against a Klitschko. Either Vladimir Klitschko, who he has unfinished business with, just like Chad Dawson has unfinished business with Jean Pascal, or his brother Vitaly Klitschko, right? David Haye isn't interested in fighting a lesser champ because for him, it's really more about the legacy than the money, right? Well, understand, most fighters don't fight into their late 30s. Certainly not fighters with opportunities. And so you have to get the money while you can. If any group is offering me 2 to 3 times the money I would get against Chad Dawson, I have to take that offer, especially if it's in a high-profile fight, right? Keep in mind, in Canada, Bute Pascal is going to be all over every major paper for several days before and after that fight happens. It's not like Pascal is fighting an unknown. He's fighting a known fighter in a high-profile career where a good performance could lift his profile, right? And so what Jean Pascal has to think about is whether it's better to fight a 168-pound fighter, right? Understand both Bute and Dawson are slick southpaws, right? So it's going to be problematical fighting either. But what Pascal has to think about is, would he rather fight a 168-pounder for more than twice the money, or would he rather fight the 175-pound champ, right, for half the money in a situation where he would have to fight Chad Dawson twice just to make the money he would make off Lucien Bute? Also, he has to ask himself, what does he gain, right? Just like Juan Manuel Marquez has to ask himself the question of whether he should fight Manny Pacquiao again. Understand that if Pascal never fights Chad Dawson again, well, he could live with that because he's the guy who beat Chad Dawson, right? There wouldn't be the idea of Chad Dawson avenging the loss, right? Pascal certainly could move on in life knowing he beat Chad Dawson, right? For him, that's not an untied shoelace. It is for Dawson, right? If he beats Bute, that raises his profile even further. Also, for Dawson, let's talk about for Dawson, because boxing's two ways. You have a signed contract to fight the guy who beat you before. You know what's going to happen? The promoters have literally offered Chad Dawson pretty much the same amount of money to fight a lesser opponent, right? So Chad Dawson still gets paid. He can't sue for being ripped off of an opportunity to get a title because he's actually the champion. He already has the belt. No one's costing him the light heavyweight belt. He still has the belt. Keep in mind, that debacle, that fight against Andre Ward, was at 168. I know everyone criticized Chad Dawson for that fight, myself included. I thought losing weight against a marquee opponent was a recipe for disaster. Well, the disasters happened. But the beauty with Dawson fighting that fight at 168 was the fight was for Ward's 168 title. Dawson kept the light heavyweight title. So Dawson doesn't lose his title by stepping aside here. Dawson gets the money, right? In other words, Dawson will keep the date with the premium channel, HBO. He'll be on HBO, he'll get the money, the opponent will be easier, and he keeps his title. To sum it all up in a sentence, I don't think that Pascal-Dawson fight is going to happen. I'm expecting in the next few days to see Lucien Bute and Jean Pascal with cheesy grins on their face standing around a podium at a presser in which they announce formally that they're going to be fighting each other. Let's shift gears. The United Kingdom. A fight I was watching closely. A fighter who, quite frankly, is a blind spot for me. Ricky Burns. He was going to fight a fighter who I have ranked on my own private listing ahead of Adrian Broner. He was going to fight Miguel Vazquez, who, in my opinion, simply put, is bringing the fast break back to boxing. This is one of the more significant figures in boxing style-wise, right? That fight is not going to happen. Ricky Burns has decided to leave Frank Warren. Now, let me just say this about Frank Warren. I'm a huge Frank Warren fan. Being in Frank Warren's position is really the kind of position where you never get any of the credit, you get all the blame. Frank Warren has made many men millionaires, right? Frank Warren literally has taken fighters who were down on their luck and has put them in world championship positions. The problem, of course, is that when a fighter reaches a point where he's a champion, then, of course, he has a lot of people talking to him. These are people who weren't around when the fighter was down on his luck and Frank Warren was there to help. Right now, the guy's a world champion. Rival promoters are coming in. Business people are coming in. They're telling the fighter he should be making, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Vitaly Klitschko money, and you know the rest. Then it gets messy. Then you have a fighter wondering why he's not getting paid more. You also have people in the media and jokers online like myself wondering why the fighter's not fighting better competition. Of course, you end up with the split. The bottom line is Frank Warren is excellent at what he does, right? Ricky Burns right now doesn't think so. While I don't believe the Miguel Vazquez infection story myself, while I personally believe, just based on the economics of boxing, that George Groves leaving the card made the people putting on the card realize that there was a possibility they could lose money on the card, right? The card was no longer what it had been. Groves is a big name in the UK. And so, of course, while they regrouped and while they sought a replacement for the Groves fight, Ricky Burns decided to bolt. That's how I see it. Again, I'm speculating here online. No one should take what I say in this regard as a factual assertion. But just suffice it to say that I don't think Ricky Burns fights Miguel Vazquez anytime soon, because someone's going to sit down and they're going to look at the tapes of these two fighters and they're going to realize that that fight carries too much risk for Ricky Burns. Ricky, don't be David Price. My point is simply this. I think Miguel Vazquez is better than Adrian Broner, right? But the public doesn't, right? The public right now is totally in love with Adrian Broner and Yorkis Gamboa. And so a Ricky Burns, quite frankly, in my opinion, would be better off fighting his mandatories and being in the sweepstakes for those big ticket fights, right? Broner, Brandon Rios, who I believe Ricky Burns would have an excellent shot on, and some others, right? Than fighting Miguel Vazquez, who, in my opinion, would beat Brandon Rios rather handily, would beat Adrian Broner. I believe Vazquez is someone you need to look at, right? He's a technician. I know looking at his fights, you're either enamored or you're bored. But understand, he's a very difficult matchup for anyone within the area code of his weight class. And because he moves around the ring, unlike most fighters today, and can do so behind a jab where he's winning all of the slow rounds. He's a big threat to make bigger known fighters look like amateurs, right? I don't see Burns fighting Vazquez anytime soon. Let's talk about a heavyweight. Magomed Abdusalamov. You need to know about this guy. Why? He's 16-0 with 16 knockouts. He has one of the biggest punches in the heavyweight division. He's a southpaw, but he packs such a wallop that he recently knocked out Jamil McCline in the second round with a right hand, right? You always need to keep track of that. When lefties are knocking you out with their right hands, and you know that their left hand is their money punch, you're talking about a guy with punching power in both hands, right? Let me also say, the punch that knocked out Jamil McCline is so short and compact that to my viewers who question the phantom punch, Ali knocking out Liston in the rematch, right? What Ali called the anchor punch. If you're going to question the anchor punch, then I encourage you to look at the film. I've placed it on my channel page of the knockout here by Magomed Abdusalamov against Jamil McCline. All I'm saying is sometimes punches happen so fast in boxing and are so short and compact, they're very hard to catch even at slow motion. Let me also point out too that leverage is a very funny thing. A fighter only has to have his ducks lined up in a row a microsecond before delivering that key punch, right? The guys who know how to punch can put it together and make it look like they hardly have any leverage on the punch. In any event, Magomed has never gone 5 rounds. He knocks everyone out in 4 rounds or less. You're going to hear his name because he has great power. But let me just say, I don't believe this guy is a serious threat right now for the heavyweight title. In fact, I don't think he's going to be a serious threat as long as guys named Klitschko rule the roost in the heavyweight division, right? Why? Because this guy has some flaws in his game, and I'm not sure if these flaws can be fixed. The first is he looks to me like he has stamina problems, right? As he swings for the fences. He's taking time off in rounds right now, and keep in mind, his fights are all short. So if the guy looks like he has stamina problems in fights that are 4 rounds or less, one wonders what happens if he fights a Vladimir Klitschko. And Klitschko covers up in the early rounds, takes this kid to the 7th, 8th, 9th round, which, keep in mind, would be several rounds past where the kid has been. Right? I'm guessing the kid might look as bad as George Foreman looked when he got extended by Ali. Right? Understand, stamina problems for a fighter who isn't even fighting 6 rounds, that's a big red flag. Right? Vladimir Klitschko has gone the distance several times. Right? He's, gotten knockouts. He has late power too. He knocked out Eddie Chambers in the 12th round of their fight. Right? You're talking about a heavyweight champ who hits hard from start to finish, who, quite frankly, is in better shape than Magomed. Right? I would expect Magomed, just off the stamina issues, in my opinion, to get stopped if he fought Vladimir Klitschko. Let's talk further. Magomed is all front foot. What does that mean? That means, in my opinion, he's a sitting duck for a guy with a straight jab. Right? Unfortunately, again, in the heavyweight division, you want straight jabs? Look at the Klitschko brothers. Right? These are the guys who, he would be fighting. Right? If you're all front foot, a jab guy is just going to hit you with the jab. Let me point out that unlike Mike Tyson, Magomed doesn't have upper body elusiveness. In other words, the guys who can work their front foot against jabbers have to be able to dodge the jab on the way in, right? I have to be able to slip under the jab and get inside. Think Joe Louis. Think Jack Dempsey, right? These are guys who come up and they're moving. So they slip the jab, get inside, they can land their power shots. If I'm stiff up top like this guy is, then I'm just getting hit with the jab. How am I going to duck Vladimir Klitschko's jab if I can't quickly move to the side and get inside? Right? So I think he's too front foot and he's too rigid. Also, in my opinion, he has slow foot speed. Right? You know, this guy walks around the ring. Understand, fighters have centers of gravity. Right? They can only move so fast and keep their boxing stance up. I don't believe this guy moves fast enough to deal with, let's say, a moving heavyweight. A few years ago, there was a guy named Larry Donald. Right? Donald actually went the distance with Riddick Bowe. And Larry Donald would stick a jab in your face and would move around the ring, kind of like Miguel Vazquez at a lighter weight. A guy like that would feast on Magomed, because I don't believe Magomed would ever be able to cut the ring off on a guy like that. Right? Let me also point out that Magomed himself doesn't have much of a jab. When a fighter doesn't have much of a jab and isn't blessed with great foot speed, understand that means that he's going to lose the slow rounds, the rounds where nobody gets knocked out or badly hurt, right? Because other guys will be able to hit him with the jab from distance and move enough to stay away from him. So if a fight were to go to a decision, if Magomed solves the stamina problems and actually goes to a decision with a Vladimir Klitschko, Klitschko would literally be able to just stay outside, shoot the jab, win a comfortable decision. Right? Also, in my opinion, Magomed is really a mid-range hooker. Right? The problem with most mid-range hookers is, again, they're right in front of you. They need for you to exchange with them. Understand, guys with jabs never have to actually fight you. Right? A guy with a jab who can fight you at long range has some protection from a mid-range hooker who can only operate at mid-range, especially when he isn't blessed with great foot speed. So I don't want to sound too hard. I want guys to take a look at Magomed Abdusalamov. He is unbeaten, 16-0. But what we do here online is we call it as we see it, right? I'm going to praise some fighters. I'm going to be skeptics of other fighters. And I'm a skeptic of Magomed Abdusalamov regarding his ability to win the heavyweight championship against one of these big-name fighters. Put a different way, one of the things that makes David Haye intriguing is the foot speed. Right? You have great punching power, but you also have foot speed. So when you see David Haye, you understand he can get in, he can get out. He's hard to corner. Right? When I see a guy with David Haye type power, and this guy has great punching power. When I see a guy with David Haye type power, the knockouts look great. But I have to ask myself, does this guy have the foot speed to stay out of harm's way? And does this guy have the stamina to be able to use that foot speed, right? Because you can run like Usain Bolt, but if you're tired after 100 meters, and this is actually a 12-round marathon, you could be in trouble. Here, I question it all on Magomed Abdusalamov. I'm expecting him to run into trouble when he goes up against elite contenders who can operate behind jabs. I'd love to see him against Alexander Dmytrenko I know Dimitrenko has come up short in some big fights, but it would be a good litmus test to see him against a guy who is tall, like Vladimir Klitschko, has a jab, but isn't quite as good as Vladimir Klitschko, right? That would be a pretty good test for Magomed. Just consider me in the skeptic camp at this point of his career, and today is March the 7th, 2013. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you stop by gamblersadvisory.com. If you're a big Magomed fan and you believe he's the future of the heavyweight division, and certainly his highlights look dramatic, right? Jamil McCline did not beat the count. That's the level of punching power we're talking about. Then I do hope you leave your comments here. Let me point out, though, in that Jamil McCline fight, did you know that he actually knocks Magomed down in the first, let's say, 45 seconds of that fight off a straight right hand, right? All I'm saying is Magomed doesn't have great defense, is vulnerable to straight punches, right? He's at the stage in his career now where after shooting a lot of bullets early in his career and taking out a lot of guys, now suddenly he's in the deeper end of the pool and some bullets are coming back at him. I'm expecting him to get dropped in some other fights. Let me hear from you. Thanks for watching.